everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayne. I write romance and romantic fiction, and today's video is going to be a little different because I have hit a major milestone in my aspiring author career. I now have an agent. I signed with Katie Thomas of Beck Literary Agency in April after first querying her in early March. And we're going out on submission with my manuscript that I've been shopping for the past how many years. It's very spicy romantic women's fiction. I call it my She's Gotta Have It meets Cinderella, about a Black biracial woman's sexual awakening in the late 80s. So that is super exciting. I'm actually it's taken a while for it to sink in, and now it's really sinking in, and I'm like, oh, this feels so great. So I thought what I'd do today is just talk a little bit about the timeline of this manuscript and the whole querying journey, talk about my process a little bit in case that might be of interest to anybody who was also going through the query trenches. And of course, I will touch on some of the emotional ups and downs. I mean, mostly it was downs, and we're writers, so we have to hit that dark night of the soul moment anyway. And then I will wrap it up talking about some of the people and resources that really helped me get to where I am now. So, believe it or not, today I just have a little bit of an outline to make sure that I don't get too far off topic. I also got my tea. I am a coffee drinker, as you have probably guessed from some of my other videos, but I have my 1 cup of coffee in the morning to really start my day, and then that's it. So now we have tea. And first I want to talk about sort of the timeline. This manuscript that I got my agent with is not my first full manuscript. I had written another one before that one that I queried. It was sort of my first manuscript that I finished that was in the genre that I'm writing in, and it's the first one that I pitched to at an agent at my first RWA conference. And that was sort of my initiation into the whole world of working towards being a professionally published author and revising and learning how to pitch and learning how to do queries and learning how to write synopses and do that whole process. And that was the manuscript that I got beta readers for, and that was actually a really fun experience. I was surprised by how fun and rewarding that experience was. I had 2 beta readers, one of whom was an avid reader and an avid romance and spicy books reader, and the other one who was actually not that into books, but she was in the film industry, and so she was very familiar with stories and wanting to be entertained. And both of their feedback was really positive, and I spent a lot of time, so I was really encouraged and spent a lot of time querying that one. Finally realized that I needed to just let that one go after a lot of false starts. Let that one go, put it aside. I mean, I still have it. I haven't given up on it, but I decided to move on to a completely new manuscript, which is the one that I got my agent with. That one I actually started writing for NaNoWriMo. It was my first experience participating in NaNoWriMo. I'd heard of it, and this is before all this stuff has kind of gone down in recent years, where they're sort of reassessing. Some things went down and they're kind of reassessing, I think, and trying to rebuild. But this was before all of that. It was my first one that I did, and I wrote the first draft in a month during Nano, and then spent a significant more amount of time revising it. I started sort of entering contests and workshopping it and actually pitching it in person to agents around 2018, 2019. And finally decided to did some revisions, got a couple beta readers, incorporated those revisions, entered contests, incorporated all those revisions. And then early January of 2020, you can tell where this is going. January of 2020, I started querying, and then of course, the entire globe was on fire, so to speak. Everything shut down, and I honestly don't remember. I'm just going to go on record now saying that I don't remember what the heck I was doing with my manuscript for the first few months of the pandemic. I was probably just trying to keep from having an anxiety attack every day, living in isolation. Also, I have another freelance gig that, and other clients that I was working with, and we were adjusting to the remote thing and figuring out how to move forward and deal with all of the things that were going on. So there was a lot of time and energy spent on that. But I do know that I started querying again in July of 2020. I don't know what prompted it. I think I was just like, well, what else am I going to do? I'm just sitting at home like everyone else. I started querying again, queried through the rest of 2020. And then I entered at the time, I think early 2021, or maybe it was late 2020, RWA. I'm a member of Romance Writers of America. RWA, they announced a new program called RAMP, which is Romance Author Mentorship Program. This was a new program that they launched as part of their rebuild and their rebranding, because RWA also had a big sort of implosion a few years ago. And I probably know more details about that than I ever wanted to, because I was president of my local RWA chapter at the time. So I really had to learn quickly what the heck was going on and figure out how to lead the organization, the local organizations, through that turmoil. If you don't know what happened with RWA, it was in 2019, and it made national and international news. I think even The Guardian wrote about it. I know the New York Times did. So it's easy to find all of that stuff. But in the wake of that, a lot of RWA's membership went down dramatically, because a lot of authors, including a lot of very successful and well-known romance authors, left the organization as a result of everything that went down. So those of us who remained kind of started working with the rebuild of the organization. And I decided to stay with the organization because my involvement with RWA in my local chapter is what helped me learn the skills and have the knowledge and the resources and the access to information that I needed to continue to move towards my goals as an author. And RWA is one of the few writing organizations that you can join even if you aren't published yet. And I write manuscripts, I write books that are heavy on romance, heavy on spice, on physical intimacy, and there is still a lot of, and particularly a few years ago, there was a lot of, hostility, anything from hostility to just sort of like dismissal of that genre, and RWA is all about that genre. So I decided to stay with the organization because the benefits that I received from the organization far outweighed anything detrimental. So as part of their rebrand, where they were just like, we need to get back to basics and focusing on the craft and focusing on the business and focusing on not just supporting authors who are already, publishing regularly and sort of know the industry really well, but those of us who are still aspiring. So they launched RAMP. I applied for the RAMP program that RWA put on. The way the RAMP program worked was that members of RWA who were published authors agreed to mentor their choice of applicants of members who have a finished manuscript but just haven't made that next step into publication. And it didn't matter whether you wanted to indie publish or traditional publish. The point was just that you had a manuscript but that was ready to go, but you hadn't gotten it published yet. So the process was kind of like querying, where you submit your materials, and you pick which mentors you want to work with. And then the mentors would look at look at the submissions that had applied for them and pick the person they wanted to work with. And I got my first choice. I got mentored by LaQuette, who is an erotic romance author and contemporary romance author. She is hybrid. She's published she's published independently, and she's also published with like Harlequin and other imprints. And that whole thing almost didn't happen. There was some mix up with the application to where she didn't even see my application until like almost the end of the submission process. It was meant to be. I truly believe that divine intervention or the universe or something was like, oh, we got some human error going on here. It's fine. We're going to fix it because this person needs to be paired with this person. This needs to happen. So I got paired with LaQuette, and that was the beginning of 2021. So basically from like January through May, I was applying for the grant mentorship program, and then we were going through the manuscript, and then coming up with, helping develop a game plan to move forward. So that whole process took place from January through May of 2021. It was a fantastic thing for me, because she read my manuscript and she gave me some additional suggestions. She gave me information and guidance about the industry itself. She helped me sort of come up with a pitch for a trilogy and a whole like proposal package, because I told her I wanted to go traditional. And she was also the first one to tell me that my story was not erotic romance as I had thought, that it was probably more in the women's fiction genre instead, which is good to know, because you need to know exactly what your genre is in order to pick your agents that you want to query and how to write your query and eventually market it. So that whole thing happened, finished the grant mentorship program, was kind of ready to make those adjustments and move forward with querying. And then I got very ill. I knew something was wrong actually during the mentorship. I knew that something was wrong, but didn't know what, certainly didn't know the extent. But by July, I was hospitalized and spent the next year dealing with the illness, getting through it, healing, and also adjusting to the fact that because of that illness, I now have ongoing health problems that will be with me for the rest of my life. And I will never be back to sort of like the energy and physical capacity that I had before all of this went down. So there was probably a good year and a half where I was not querying or doing hardly anything. I was recovering. So I finally got back into querying my manuscript, I think in late 2022. And then what the heck happened? So I was querying in 22, querying in 2023. So this is definitely, I'm in this for the long haul. Because this is like, 5 years of working on querying this manuscript. Then I think it was in early 2023. So I got a bunch of rejections. I guess that goes without saying. I was querying and getting a lot of rejections, and then started to really think about, I had still, admittedly, hate to admit this, sorry LaQuette, I had kind of not really taken her advice about going the women's fiction route. I was still querying it as erotic romance because two of my beta readers, who are also published erotic romance writers, really thought that erotic romance doesn't have the same necessarily strict box that other genres of romance do. So they thought, they thought it was squarely in the erotic romance. So I'm like, oh good, that means I don't have to completely redo my queries. I'm going to keep querying it as erotic romance. Did that for months. Then RWA, this is just another reason why RWA has been such a great resource for me. RWA will throughout the year put on little sort of mini workshops that are very specific topics, and they offered one that was called, it was taught by Laura Drake, and it was called The Difference Between Romance and Women's Fiction. And I'm like, maybe I should take that because that's what my mentor was telling me. So I took the workshop and was like, oh yeah, my mentor was 1,000% correct. My story is in the women's fiction genre. And the teacher, Laura Drake, the way she sort of positioned it is that it's just a matter of what your focus is. Romance is very much focused on the relationship between the people involved in the relationship, whereas, with fiction or romantic fiction and women's fiction, the focus is on like her journey. And I realized, oh yeah, in this story, there's romance, there's a happy, satisfying ending, there's lots of on-page physical intimacy. But the focus of the story itself is really on her journey to get to that love story. So, another bit of information that she gave me was query agents who are open to both women's fiction and romance, because your story is kind of a crossover. So target those agents. That was the other really great advice that I got from that workshop. So I took some time. First, I just had to take time acceptance. I had to accept that I needed to revise my query that I had worked a really long time on. I got to go through that whole thing all over again. So that's what I spent the last part of 2023 doing was revising my query. As I was doing it, I'm like, this is actually a really good thing, because now I'm seeing that the previous angle did not really represent the book well. Like, I need to show that she's a biracial Black woman. I need to show that she's coming from sort of a sexually repressed upbringing. I want to show that she has found family. I want to show that she is really into music and uses music to help her sort of construct her identity and her strength. I want to show that there's a masked identity trope, that there's a love triangle, all of these things, sexual awakening, all that stuff. So I rewrote the query, and then I contacted one of my buddies who's in my writing group with me, who's a part of Lyra. Her name is Lauren Defoe. She writes speculative fiction, and she reviewed it, and we got together, had lunch, and she gave me all of her notes, which were amazing. And I incorporated all of her feedback and finally had a brand new query to run with by the end of 2023, but now it was December. Ain't nobody looking at their inbox in December, So I'm like, okay, next year, 2024 is the year. I'm going to hit the ground running. I'm going to query with this new, beautiful, brand new back cover blurb. And I did that for the entire year of 2024. I queried just about every week and started racking up even more rejections, baby. And kept on going through the beginning of 2025. And finally, in March, queried the right agent who was really interested in my story and was like, hey, are you still looking for representation? And I said, I sure am. And that's where we are now. So now we're caught up on the timeline. That took way longer than I expected. What's the next thing? Oh, the process. So I'll talk a little bit about my process. First, I started off with a spreadsheet. I got this template from somebody else who used to be a part of Lyra. Her name is Jeffe Kennedy. She writes fantasy romance. She's written so many books. I'm a little in awe, actually, but she used to be a member of my writers group. She's like, hey, I'll share she's a self-proclaimed spreadsheet queen, and she's like, I have a spreadsheet template for querying agents that I can send you. And I said, please do. And I used that template. So it was a template that basically has the name of the agent, the name of the agency, contact info, guidelines, what they're looking for, queried date, query response date, that whole bit. So I use that spreadsheet, and and I can sort and search and all of that. So I use that spreadsheet to track my information. and keep track of who I was querying and who I wanted to query. And I started off, I think, using Query Tracker to get a list of agents, created an account, and then just started doing that search and finding people who were open and who were looking for what I was writing and sending off the query. I also found out about, because what starts happening is when you start racking up rejections, you also start running out of people to query because you've queried them. So I started looking at other sources of agents, and I forget who, it was probably from somebody in Lyra, in my local chapter, who mentioned manuscript wish list. So I started using manuscript wish list to get another list of people to query. Another thing that I did was when I would read a book that had any elements that were similar to my story, I would look in the acknowledgments and see who their agent was, and then go check them out online and see if they were open or if anybody else in their agency was open. And I would build my list that way. So that was my process for querying. And I also had, another thing is that a lot of agents now, I would say a majority of agents now are on Query Manager, which is the agent side of Query Tracker. And so they have like a form that you have to fill out. So I just kind of set up a little, what I called my little kit. I called it a query kit, where I would just list name of manuscript, and I'd have my name of my manuscript, author, and I'd have my author name, email. I would have all the information in my documents, so all I had to do was copy and paste. And that made the process of querying really easy, because you basically can just kind of go through it without having to double think anything. So that was another process that I used that was really helpful. I created individual folders for each agent that I was querying, and I would put in kind of what I use to query them, because different agents, for the most part, every agent is going to want a bio, a query, and sample pages. Some also want a synopsis. Some want a synopsis that's only 1 page. Some want a synopsis that's 3 pages or less. So I would just, whatever it is I sent them, I would keep in my folder. So that was the process that I used. As far as the emotional ups and downs, lots of downs, because by the end, I racked up 67 rejections. I'm actually kind of glad that I didn't have to go for the 100, because a lot of people will tell you, you got to query 100 agents before you get anybody who's interested. So I had kind of gotten to the point, and this was like this was definitely an emotional low. I had gotten to the point where I was like, Shayne, you are just going to have to be content, or make peace with, or take some satisfaction from the fact that now that you've gotten all these rejections, your goal is to get over 100 rejections. And then you can reevaluate. Then you can really plummet into the depths of despair and figure out what you're going to do from that point forward. But I really just had to get to the point where my goal was to get over 100 rejections. Because even though I'm like, I know everybody goes through all this, at some point you're like, wow, nobody likes my story. And the rejections ranged from just not a fit for my agency to a majority of them were just either they never got back to me, or they got back to me with not a fit for my agency. And then a few of them got back to me with interesting or intriguing premise. There's some good stuff here. I like, but I don't love. And those ones were like, you just want to go, ooh. Like but don't love is, yeah, that's still nah. But it's fine. It's fine, because that's real. That's real. It's fine. It's totally fine. After enough of those, you're kind of like, dang. It really is. Who is it? Tracy Oliver. Tracy Oliver, screenwriter, showrunner. She did Girls Trip. She did the reboot of First Wives Club. I think she also did Harlem. I listened to an interview with her where she said, you basically have to believe in yourself more than anybody else does. And boy, was I remembering those lines when I kept getting, rejection after rejection. There was one rejection that actually brought me to tears. Here's a tip. Don't ever go through your rejection emails when you're getting ready to go into a work meeting, because they were trying to be nice, but you know how it is. You know, when the more you try to make it be nice, the worse it gets. So this particular rejection was kind of pretty much along the lines of, oh, good job. You sent out your first query. Even though, no, we're not interested. Keep going. Keep revising. Keep getting critiques. Keep working on your craft. Keep studying the market. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, by the end of it, I was like, oh my God, this person thinks that I can't write. Because this was a manuscript that had gone through multiple revisions, 2 beta readers, a developmental edit, and a mentorship. And I'm like, oh my God, is it coming across like I'm a newbie? Like I can't write at all? I was literally convinced that I just could not write after getting that rejection. It wasn't until, I don't think, the next day, it might have been later that evening or the next day, that I realized that was probably a form reply. I hope it was a form reply. But anyway, that one hurt. That one actually made me cry and actually made me doubt my writing skills. But I got over it and kept going. I would say that probably my lowest, my longest, I did hit a pretty prolonged low as far as my emotional state of mind, I think last winter, like around November. Because I just remember being like, oh my gosh, if I have to go into another one of my monthly writer meetings and say, I'm still querying and I'm still revising another manuscript. I'm still querying and I'm still revising another manuscript. And then when I kept coming to the end of the list and going, am I running out of people to query? Because there were a few weeks last year where I didn't query anyone because it was taking the whole week just to find somebody. But it was just like, at a point last winter, I was like, man, this sucks. This does not feel good at all. I'm starting to really doubt whether I actually have anything that's going to work. I would not want to even talk about my process or where I was with my querying, because I would start to feel the little pinpricks of tears. It was not good. And then, and then you have winter break. I took time off in December like everyone else and kind of regrouped, refilled the well, as they say, and came back in 2025 like, okay, we can do this. Let's do this. And started querying again. And I remember, actually, I didn't remember. I only remembered because I went back and looked at my journals when I got the email that says, hey, we're interested in talking if you're still looking for representation. When I got that email, I was like, oh my gosh. I literally had to go take a walk. I was so like this, I couldn't even think straight. But I went back to look and see, where was my state of mind when I queried this agent? Well, turns out that day that I queried her, I was nursing a migraine. And those are things migraines are things I tend to forget about as soon as I can. As soon as they're done, it's like, I just want to forget that whole thing happened. So that's a lot of forgetting because I get them about once a week. So I'd had a migraine, but I had set up my goals for the quarter. Those goals were still fresh in my mind. And I'm like, your goal this quarter, like it's been for the past 20 quarters, is query 2 agents a week. So I was like, I got to query. It doesn't require any thought because I have my process set up. It's just copy and paste into that's all it is. You can do this. So I queried 2 agents. The very next day, my head felt better, but I was still emotionally down in the dumps. I was going through the whole thing again of like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Maybe I should just give up. Maybe I'd be happier if I gave up. This sounds so cliche. I know it sounds cliche. Sometimes cliches are cliches because they happen frequently enough. They're so universal because that's what it was. And then the day after that was when I got the email saying, we're interested in representation. Yeah, so that's where we are now. So, did I shout out everybody? I think I did. I talked about RWA and Lyra, my local chapter, and all of the resources I got from them. One other person that I didn't mention, And this is not somebody I know personally, but it's somebody that I feel like I kind of know because I watch her YouTube channel. Another author named Lindsay Puckett. She writes a completely different genre than I do. She writes middle grade. I write adult. She writes fantasy, paranormal. I write, real world. And she writes kind of cozy. Anyway, she writes middle grade fantasy. Kind of cozy, I think. Although I think that the manuscript that she's working on now is supposed to be darker and grittier. But anyway, Lindsay Puckett, I'll put her information down below and also up here or here, wherever it is that I end up putting the stuff. She has a whole series. And I guess I could have done this, but I just didn't have the heart to. It would not have been pretty. She vlogged her whole querying journey, and she has a whole playlist. And that, I have to say, that during my downtime, when I was really down in the dumps, watching her go through it and triumph in the end did give me hope, and it gave me yeah, you can do it too. I just got to keep going, because I think she had 60 plus rejections too before she found her agent. So she has a vlog, and she has, I looked at her videos to kind of figure out what I should do now that I'm in talks with an agent. And I also went back and I talked to Lauren, who was the one who helped me get my query blurb into tip-top shape. She also has experience in this and is published author, so she gave me some tips. But yeah, Lindsay Puckett's playlist about querying is fantastic. So I want to give her a shout out. So that is it, y'all. That is my story about my querying journey. Let me know if you're interested in any more of this type of content, author life, writer life, any of that. Let me know if you're interested in that down in the comments. When something happens, I will mention it on here. And in the meantime, I will see you in the next video, where I'm probably going to be back to talking about some fun books that I've read. Take care, remember to like, and we'll see you next time. Bye!